future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre Lindh.
Welcome back to iGaming Next Online.
There's not just one goal, there's multiple goals. Ignore dilution if the deal's good because you'll make more from a bigger pot.
It wasn't that people preferred the office or preferred remote. They actually preferred the option.
In other words, COVID-19 is giving us a glimpse into the future.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the iGaming Next podcast. How's it going, Pini?
Great, Pierre. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Very, very good. It's back in Malta here. I was in Spain for a couple of weeks, actually visiting my brother. But back in Malta, everything shut down. But you know what? It's okay with me, actually. It makes me more focused on work, so I can't complain. And in Israel, everything is open. Everything is back to normal, no?
Yeah, Israel is the world's laboratory in terms of COVID vaccination, and it's going great. So life is almost back to normal, and hopefully it stays this way.
Yeah, I hope so as well. It feels like there is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel here. Obviously, Israel leading the way in the world here, actually, with the vaccination process. Is it complete now, or?
It's like, I think it's like 60% of the population are like fully vaccinated. But I guess it's enough to make the numbers very, very low. I just checked yesterday, it was like 135 cases, which is very low. And they just kind of like opening up and relaxing more and more constraints that they had before. So it looks very positive.
Amazing. Happy to hear that, Pini. So, to start the podcast today, I mean, Pini, you're the CEO of Optimove, and I just thought it was funny. You did a presentation that I was watching the other day where you went like, this is the first and only job I ever had.
Right.
You've obviously been building Optimove, and this is your life, this is your career, this is everything you've done. So I just wanted to start off with, introduce yourself a little bit, and how did the idea come to be, and just your journey so far.
Sure. So I was in academia up until I was 30. And I was doing some work in around operations research and stochastic modeling. And then basically I started the Optimove journey. It began as a kind of like a data agency at the beginning where there was no software. So that's how we got started. I had a partner at the time. He was a PhD in machine learning, and he left quite early. But we did like the agency thing for 3 years. And then in 2012, we actually launched Optimove. And I always say that, I kind of like grow Optimove, but Optimove also grows me as an executive, as an adult. So it's pretty funny. So yeah, that has been my experience, and it is my first grown-up job, right? If you put aside bartending and things like that when I was a student.
Yeah, which also gives a pretty good learning experience as being a bartender as well.
Sure,
but
for sure.
Different ways, yeah. So Optimove obviously leading CRM tools within the iGaming industry. But I want to start today a little bit, just Pini, by first principle thinking. I'm a big fan of first principle thinking, kind of what Elon Musk does when he asks himself, what is the business model of Tesla, for example, and he breaks it down in very, very basic terms, how he's going to succeed. And he does that by saying, for example, in terms of Tesla, he's like, okay, we use a little bit of money that we have to build a very expensive car because we can only build a couple of them. Then we use that money to build a second car that is produced in medium amount of examples, targeting like the less rich, let's say. And then we use that money to build the mass market car that's going to take over the world. That's like typical first principle thinking. And yeah, it's a great model, and easy to understand and so forth. So I want to ask you, Pini, just breaking down CRM at its core. Can you explain a little bit what is the use of CRM and what it is and what's the purpose and so forth?
Yeah, for sure. So I think first of all, when the term we like to use is CRM marketing and not CRM alone. I think CRM alone, people typically think about Salesforce, and it's typically a tool for salespeople and during usually in B2B environments and not in B2C environments. when you talk about B2C environments, just like gaming, where you actually, providing a platform for brands that have end customers, we talk about CRM marketing. And the innate principle of CRM marketing is, first of all, it's marketing, right? So it's about delivering some kind of a message to your end consumers. And it's obviously about storytelling and mostly about engaging people, right? So you can, in a certain world, you can spend zero money on marketing in general and believe that you have an amazing product and people are just going to talk to one another. And all you need to do is provide them with the service or the product or the entertainment, and they'll just come and enjoy it and come back. Maybe if you have, if you're curing cancer, right, as we always say. But if you're not, you probably need to do marketing. You need to engage with your customers. And CRM marketing is typically associated with what we call post the funnel. So you have acquisition marketing, which is everything you do to acquire a new customer. But once you have a new customer or even a new visitor or somebody that's already kind of like landing on one of the properties that your brand has, right? We can say from that point, you start doing CRM marketing because you can identify that person again and again. So from identifying the person, it goes back to ultimately you want to create loyalty, you want to maximize customer lifetime value, and the way you do it is you engage with your customers, right? You send them different messages. Mostly those messages are trying to start a conversation with your customer. So you want to do something that makes them react, right? Whether it's because it's very relevant or because you find them in the best channel that you can find them where they actually are. And it's just about, the engagement. So you send messages to people, you do a little bit of storytelling, and ultimately it becomes an extension of your branding efforts, right? Because your brand is this thing that represents your values and what you're about, and a promise for repeated experience. Typically Americans say that, like, what is a brand? It's like a promise for repeated experience, like something that you can expect and know. But through CRM marketing, when you create this kind of like one-to-one interaction, and this is also very important. In the past, you didn't have this because everything was mass marketing. With technology, you're able to speak to small segments, small groups of customers, and have a discussion that's much more intimate. And it all goes back to the origins of CRM, right? So usually, like, what's the idea of CRM, right? So you have your local grocer, you go down every day. That person's name is John. He knows you by name. He greets you when you go in. He tells you that the favorite bread that you really like is just arrived and it's fresh and warm. He tells you that, you can try out something new because he knows the types of other things you tried in the past and you told him that you like it. But John, the grocer, he has a relationship with 50 customers, 100 customers that he knows, because these are the people from the community, from the neighborhood. But what can a brand do when the brand has 1 million customers? So we're always chasing this story of John, right? We're always, chasing this story of replicating that level of intimacy that a big brand is trying to achieve with the consumers, with a large volume, a large quantity of consumers. So I think that's the basics of CRM marketing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it's I guess to summarize it, it's kind of like getting to know your customer. Like if you have a large set of customers, getting to know them on an individual basis so that you can deliver personalized experience for them in general. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And you talked about that the gaming industry specifically is kind of the pioneers in CRM marketing. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Why specifically is the iGaming industry so ahead in CRM marketing, let's say?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting, and I got a chance to think about it only kind of like a few years after we engaged with the industry very closely. And if you think about it, the gaming industry is one of the first industry to go online, right? So that's a fact, right? It's one of the first industries to truly offer like an online experience, way before e-commerce. And so that's the first thing. And When things become online, you can do a lot more one-to-one marketing because you have people's data. If you think about a traditional retailer, if the retailer has a loyalty program and people identify themselves every time they purchase, then you can do CRM marketing because you know them and you see their repeated behavior. But still, very big retailers, a big portion of their revenues is not identifiable. So somebody, you pick a product, you purchase it, you go out, you don't identify yourself. In online, everybody is essentially enrolled into this loyalty program or in an app, right? So you're automatically identified. So I think this is kind of like the beginning that made gaming a very good fit. But there's other elements that make gaming a very good fit, even if I compare it to other industries today. So one of them, for example, is the velocity, the speed of interaction. Gaming players consume the entertainment quite often, right? It's not like a retailer where you're buying mattresses and you're going to buy once in 3 years, and then during those 3 years you don't want to hear from the brand, you don't care about it, you moved on and you continue with your life. In gaming, you may play once a week, once a month, 2 times a week or 3 times a day, depending on your profile. So the very high level of interaction creates an opportunity to start multiple conversations and constantly engage with your audience, with your players. So that's another thing. Another thing is it's very data rich, right? You got different types of products. You can track every spin, every bet, every deposit, every withdrawal. And you can compile a rich story about each customer and each individual. So you got a lot of data points. That's another thing that tell you a lot of things about your players. Another thing is gaming operators. Usually, I think today there's a lot of discussions about bonusing, and some countries are restricting bonusing, for example, Sweden or Spain. But at the same time, you have a lot to say, right? You can engage with your players with many, many different things. So in retail, for example, if you want to get a discount, you need to speak to the merchant and have the merchant fund the discount, or you fund it yourself. In gaming, like things like matchup bonus and things like that are very easy to do. And you got lots of things going on in sports. You got a ton of events happening, a ton of games. So, you have people who are fans of a specific team. So you have multiple reasons to start a conversation. And the CRM mechanism at its core is very advanced, right? Very detailed. So that too creates like this really fertile soil to do CRM marketing. And lastly, I think because gaming was born online, the level of talent that you have in gaming, like people that deal with data, people that understand the predictive models, analytics departments, it's something that happened in gaming much sooner than any other industry.
Interesting. So you mentioned the example of the person who buys the mattress every 3 years, for example, and clearly the difference here is that the mattress company can quite easily perfect their CRM because there isn't that much interaction that is needed, right? So there isn't that much innovation that is needed or that is possible in the CRM space for that type of product or that company. Whereas in the iGaming space, for example, there is so much interaction between the customer and the organization, and also the behavior of the customer is constantly changing. There's new products and so on and so forth. So there's just kind of an incredible amount of data that can be captured to be able to then kind of perfect the relationship with that specific customer and offer unique experiences and offers and so forth. So on that note, what would you say is like the if you go back in time like 10 years and how CRM was done then, when you started Optimove and your first job and these type of things, and what progress have you made until now, and how would you say how much can still be improved? Let's say how much further can CRM marketing go than where we are today?
Yeah. I think that the basic principle has always been the same, kind of like going back to John the grocer. But at the same time, the ability to achieve that vision is getting much, much better. and it's related to a lot of universal trends in technology. For example, kind of like cloud computing and data technologies. It's all making all of us much closer to that vision. So even 10 years ago, we would get a lot of data about the players. It was harder, right? If we work with like a very technological company, it's going to be easier for them to do it. But companies that struggled more, it was harder. There's a lot of questions about sorry, kind of like data uptime versus data downtime. Are you getting everything correctly all the time? So that's one element, and I think today is like it's being completely democratized, right? So it's much easier to work with any type of brand, capture their data with great accuracy in real time, and for multiple sources. It's all getting much easier, and obviously you can see Amazon and Azure and all of the cloud providers and GCP are doing extremely well because of that, because everybody's leveraging the great compute power that exists today in the world. So this is on the data side. I think the same thing if you talk about insight generation. People did predictive models in the past as well, but only big corporations could afford it. Today, again, thanks to the cloud, you can deploy predictive models in production. You can train them much easier. You can make sure a big problem with predictive models is that they age, and at some point they lose accuracy. So there's lots of technologies to make sure that doesn't happen. So also the ability to deliver on predictive models has become much easier, and even the math has been democratized, right? Today you can grab the Amazon recommendation model, right? They offer it as an API, right? Where the same model that tells you these products are also recommended for you, you can get it, right? You can get it as an API, and there's loads of open source libraries, and all the math and all the algorithms have also been completely democratized in terms of the ability to derive insights. So what's left today is a company's ability to pick the right problem to solve. That's actually very big. Not necessarily the problems that have already been solved, but like pick the next best problem that you think the world's going to want, and then stitch it together with the right math. So this is kind of like, let's say data, then insights, and then the third part is engagement. We're seeing much more communication channels, right? So I'll give you an interesting stat. Optimove clients today, on average, they use 3.6 channels. That's the average. Obviously, the best ones would use 7, 8, 9, but the average is 3.6. And 3 years ago, it was around 2. So it's almost doubling the amount of channels. So for example, the ad platforms, right? You can show messages today across Facebook and Google and Criteo and LiveRamp, and treat it as a CRM marketing campaign. So for known customers, you go outside to an ad platform and you show the messages, which wasn't possible, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. It's been around for a while, but it's getting more and more prevalent. The same thing for mobile messaging, right? So a lot of messages, in-app push, web push, like, and having an orchestrator, kind of like a smart orchestrator running those messages constantly, and email and web. So it's all about stitching all of those channels together. In the past, they used to work in silos. So you would have an email team, a mobile team, a web team, right? An acquisition team that did the ads. But it's one customer, right? So ideally, you want the customer to experience the brand symmetrically across those different channels. So that's also becoming much better, and I think that it will continue to become much better. So I think past and future, kind of like it's all about realizing that vision, and I think slowly and surely we're getting closer and closer to that place. And for us, I think after kind of like the data part has been improved dramatically, the predictive part and insights part has been improved dramatically. For us, the next phase is essentially optimization. So having this kind of like a machine learning decider or agent that sits in the middle and basically takes decisions in terms of what's the best thing that we can offer a certain player, right? Where we have a gamut of alternatives. What's the best thing to, this is what we're called Optimove. That's the same vision for us as well. Like what's the optimal message, the optimal move that you can do with every customer at every point in time. And once you have a strong data foundation and you have a strong execution capability in terms of all the different messaging channels, marketers start to generate a lot of different messages, all of a sudden they're able to start multiple conversations with their customers. And now it's a question of optimization. What's the best thing to show to who and when? When you're 10 years ago, or even I think still with many companies today, when you're at starvation and you can only do 1 or 2 journeys and you can only activate your customers across 1 or 2 channels, you don't have that problem. You're just trying to do the basics. You're just like, oh, I just want a good welcome series, right? Or I just want a good win back journey. But when ultimately, the one title I can give it, you want to reach personalization at scale. That's the future, personalization at scale. So if today it's done in a certain way, the scale will improve. So instead of having 20 different segments that you constantly communicate with, you will have hundreds and hundreds or even thousands, and you will have a machine learning decider that's just going to manage all of that automatically for you.
Yeah, super interesting. So it sounds a little bit like removing friction and being able to work at scale to deliver that at the end of the day, that personalized experience, going back to Joe the baker or whatever is the end goal here.
The grocer.
Joe the grocer, yes. So again, looking into the future, you mentioned machine learning, and I know that machine learning, AI in general, is something that Optimove is taking seriously. In terms and AI in general, I think is a big hype word at the moment in the world. Fueled by again Elon Musk, self-driving cars, and the feeling that we are just behind the door of like having massive AI capabilities in the real world, but sometimes also AI can be a little bit overhyped, so to say. I mean, what's your thoughts in general on AI, its capabilities, and where it will be relevant to you guys and CRM in the going forward? Like, how far can we actually go, do you think, in the next decade, let's say, using AI tools?
This is we can go for hours about this topic because it's also philosophical to talk about. So I got quite a few references about it. I think that let me try to organize my thoughts. But like I would start from, I think Gartner typically use what they call a technology hype cycle, right? So
exactly,
it comes up, there's huge hype,
go down,
and then it starts to go down. And I think right now, I think the peak of the hype cycle of AI was like 18 months ago, and actually it started to go down. And we can and a funny story, when I started Optimove, it was like when I started actually the agency, it was around 2010, even before Optimove. I met a bunch of tech veterans, and they told me, Pini, don't use the word AI. Don't mention AI. Like if you say AI, you're going to be dead. Because at the time there was another hype cycle that like went down, but then kind of like 8 years later it came back. And I think, why did it come back? Because people start seeing things like Google Translate. Google Translate is an amazing example of AI working perfectly well, right? And constantly learning and evolving and improving. And I'm amazed myself by the results, like things I used to write like a year ago that it was shit, and now it's like decent. It's crazy. It can even, sometimes when I write in Hebrew and I try to translate it, I would write an English word with Hebrew fonts, which is not even a word in Hebrew. But Google identifies that. Mm-hmm. And so it's crazy. Amazing. So things like that, and things like Siri and Watson with the Jeopardy game, gotten people to believe that, okay, AI is amazing. It's going to change the world in every field. And the difference is that, and I think what they realize is that not all the problems are the same. Some problems are very well suited for AI, and other problems would struggle with AI. So that's in general what I would say. Another thing, there's always the relationship between kind of like man and machine. Everybody thinks about the movie Terminator, like AI is going to replace us and going to take our jobs and things like that. But actually, in history of mankind, what replaced humans is not AI, it's automation. So automation replaced humans, not AI. So like automatic cash registers in Tesco will replace human cashiers, but that's not AI, right? That's just automation technology. So
automated CRM tools might replace marketers.
Okay, so I'll touch that in a second. Actually, our approach is so exactly. So our approach is actually, you should think about instead of Terminator, you should think about Iron Man. So Iron Man is a man, and then when he wears the suit, right, he basically becomes enhanced, right? So you can enhance your capabilities using AI. And that's exactly the analogy that we use. So we still think, and especially in marketing, we think that you're going to need the marketer for many, many, many years in the future. Maybe in 20, 30 years, I don't know, maybe technology will get to a scary point. But like at the moment, you still need the marketer to come up with an idea, right? People always talk about, when you talk about man versus machine, you say, machines can do many things, but they don't know how to ask a question, right? So asking a question is something that people will probably forever be better than machines. And another thing is machines don't know how to design an experiment, right? To design a multi-step experiment that's going to give me some kind of a result and I can reach some kind of a conclusion. So in those areas, you still need a human being. You need a person to say, hey, if the player has a lot of balance in their account and they haven't played for 3 months, I think that's a cool idea for a campaign. I mean, a machine would need a semantic knowledge of the world, trying to understand, but we're predicting something about people. We are people, we get it. Like, it makes sense to us. It's easy. So our thinking is something that works. We think in terms of narratives, and it's a completely different way of thinking. So our entire approach for AI is basically enhancing the marketer. So saying to the marketer, look, you come up with ideas, you come up with different experiments, and we use AI mostly for optimization. So in that, so the marketer defines kind of like the framework. He tells the AI, this is where you play, right? You play over here. I define the boundaries. I define the framework. I tell you, what is the surroundings of the problem that you're going to solve. And then AI is going to use, the power of computers and trying multiple variants and things like that, and find the best solution, and just, squeeze a little bit more value than what the marketer would have done alone, right? Sometimes a lot more value. So I think that's the general approach. It's not necessarily, I think, in the beginning, you asked me about what happened like 10 years ago. So a lot of people think that, AI is usually, when you think about the problems, you have a clustering problem, a classification problem, and a prediction problem. Those are the 3 most common problems that you solve with AI. Like coming up with the risk of churn model, propensity model, or predicting future value, like predictions themselves, they're not as beneficial, in my opinion, unless they're used for optimization. So the whole point is to take what the marketer has done and then use all of these models for better decisioning, better optimization, better serving of messages, choosing the best thing to do, but among alternatives that the marketer has provided. I'm going to stop here to see if you still have a pulse.
Yes, I do. I'm listening deeply here. I mean, just a comment from my side would be what you are saying here as well, to summarize as well, is the fact as well that, like you're saying, the input has to come from the human. Let's say, what is the goal here? What are we kind of doing? But another aspect perhaps is as well the trust between the human and the AI, in the sense that not in the sense of the Terminator perhaps, but AI and machine learning is so complex that when Google programs their machine learning system to recognize a dog from a cat, it can do it really well. but we as humans cannot say why it can do it, right? And that poses problems in if you scale it up. You don't know if you can trust the AI to take the right decisions always, right? So, for example, I don't know if you have seen this funny example of the Husky AI problem, where basically they program a machine learning system to recognize husky dogs from normal dogs. Okay, and after a while, the system start learning, it start perfecting it, and after a while, it start getting the right answer every time. But they realized that it didn't recognize a husky from other dogs because it was a husky. The reason it recognized husky was because most of the huskies are in icy conditions, so there's always like snow in the picture. So the machine learning system learned to recognize snow from not snow, and that's how it told the human that it was a husky or no husky. And I guess that boils down to the problem where we don't know exactly why the machine learning system comes to the conclusion it does, and that's also why we need a human to intervene sometimes, right?
I think that's actually, it's about understanding how it works. I think that this is a great example, but that you just mentioned. So my 3-year-old, when he was 2, you show them he saw a real cat and then 2 pictures of cats, and after 3, a sample size of 3 observations, he can identify a cat, in 3D, in an illustration, this is what we are very good at. So if you think about human versus machines, people are very good at generalizing with very low sample size. Right? We do it all the time, right? Because that's how we're wired as creatures. It's something primordial in the way we're programmed, right? It's basically in our machine code, right? It's way down there, and humans are very good at that, right? You can see the same thing repeating itself 3-4 times, you're done. You're like, oh, I'll never do this and this and this when this and this and that happens. That's how you think, right? That's why, by the way, we're also racist. But let's not go there. But that's in general the same reason why we are racist, because we are wired like that. And a machine, and my 3-year-old could spot like a new animal after 3 observations. The machine learning algorithm needs millions, if not billions, of observations of different pictures where there is a cat to ultimately see that this is a cat. But the way it works, it's basically very simple, right? So, like I think with a cat, it's finding the triangle of the pointy, but it doesn't start with like a strategy. It basically starts with brute force. It scans. So what happened with the husky pictures? It's not because of some kind of an intent. What happened was it just turned out to be a very good strategy. If you see a dog in a picture that has many, many white pixels, which is probably snow, and I'm probably oversimplifying it, right? So this is where you can, and then the model works on percentage of error and success, right? So it's called basically reinforcement learning, right? So you go through many, many observations, you make a mistake, you try something else. You make a mistake, you try something else. You try something else, then 10% of the times you get it right. Then you go deeper over there and you try and you try. So that's basically how it works. There's nothing. I don't think it's something to be afraid of in terms of the reinforcement learning process itself. It works without conscience, without a sense of meaning, a sense of understanding. It's just doing an optimization problem. So if you start putting pictures of huskies in the middle of New York City, the model will have to learn actually how a husky looks like, maybe more fur, or maybe the blue eyes, or I don't know what, but like or it's not going to succeed. I don't know, but like that's how it works.
Yeah, exactly. I think I guess in that example is that, and it could perhaps be that this bias exists in other AI machine learning systems as well, where it tells the right answer, but we just don't know why, and it might be saying it for the wrong reason. So kind of unleashing AI for much more complex operations and much more important operations. Let's say, for example, you unleash AI to replace lawyers to interpret contracts, for example. To make that commitment, we really need to know why the AI is choosing certain decisions. And I guess that is the limitation in AI right now, that we just don't know how to break down the machine learn, like the neural networks that is associated with the machine learning system. Whereas I think which is a big problem in AI, I think, how they are trying to solve it is by creating explainable AI, right? Like XAI, that is called, right? Which basically solves that issue. We can look at the model and we can say that the AI is choosing the Huskies because there is snow in the picture. We can see that black and white kind of thing. And I guess that is the key to kind of unlock more important AI.
We did it ourselves. So like sometimes if we build a model, if we build a model that's based on a neural network, as you mentioned, and you get a great prediction, and the prediction is very accurate, but the customer tells you, but who's going to churn? To tell me the reasons. So then what we do, we take the results of the neural network, and then we build a decision tree. It just shows you what happens. So, if the customer didn't visit your site for more than 30 days, and then if the customer is, never played poker, and then you build another model on top of the deep learning to explain the deep learning.
All right, I understand. So that has to be, a little bit the key here to kind of really unleash the AI to take more deeper decisions or to give better recommendations. Actually, so that I actually can explain why it's taking certain decisions. Basically, that must be a big focus of you guys as you are developing your AI systems, I would imagine.
Yeah, but I think for us it's definitely kind of like we have some other applications in the system that we have a bot called Optibot that basically gives recommendations, and sometimes kind of like the marketer needs to trust the recommendation before the marketer actually analyze. And sometimes you have some trust issues there, and people need to be convinced, or it's not a part of the strategy that they decided to do as a company. So many times the problem comes from even users are afraid to take decisions that may impact. They don't want to go through kind of like the approval cycles and go up and ask their manager or the executive. So yes, over there we see some trust issues. But overall, when the marketer creates a few alternatives, essentially the marketer is okay with each alternative being presented to the end consumer, to the player. So now it's only a question of finding the best mix that makes you the most money, right? So we have campaigns that are called self-optimized campaigns, where the alternatives, the options of the different things you're going to show the player are given by the marketer. Now the marketer is like, hey, I would just do a plain A/B test, and I would put 50% here and 50% here. So what I'm saying is like, let me have the percentages. You're fine with 50-50, so you're fine with, you don't know who's going to fall here and who's going to fall here. So Pierre is the player, you can get message A or message B, and message A, let's say it's across email and push, and message B is like Facebook and Google, and this is a promotion, and the other one is an unveiling of a new product or a new game. You'll find with the Pierre seeing either one of them. So let us have the percentages, and let us do the optimization. I'll show you eventually that I can make you more money, right? I'll show you in the analysis that I make you more money than random 50-50.
Yeah.
So you don't have the fear factor in this type of example.
Yeah. So Pini, you mentioned A/B testing here previously, and I have a question in regards to that and kind of the capabilities of AI in general as we move forward. And I'm not sure if it's a relevant question or not, but looking into the future, A/B testing right now is obviously you are testing against the market, the real market in real time, so to say, and understanding whether you should go to A or if you should go to B, and kind of scale up the campaign from there. But seeing that AI is becoming more and more powerful, that you are creating and collecting this amount of data that you have, is it possible to create like predictive models where you build simulated A/B testing using AI to predict predict the A/B testing, basically? Is that a relevant question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to what we said before, where humans are better at asking questions and designing experiments. So what you're asking, can a machine design an experiment? I think probably, and again, I'm no, there's other people on the planet who know AI much better than I do, but I did spend a little bit of time on it. So I think that probably you can train a AI to ask, to create experiments which are very similar to different experiments that it has seen before. So you can probably do that, but like, that's always how it needs, right? You need to teach it something, there's zero, knowledge of the world and how the world works. But for example, like if you're thinking of, and mostly it's going to be better with environments that are more well guarded, I think, or more narrowed in terms of their scope. Typically, marketing has to do with the world and trends that go on and seasonality and sports. You have events and obviously you're going to do a lot of campaigns about the Euro. When the Euro is coming up, right? And so then like, okay, AI could start. You can teach AI to look for different sporting events and then offer specific campaigns for specific matches. So maybe it's going to be. So you can probably do stuff like that, but it has to be around something that it can see a set of experiments designed by people and then try to mimic that or even do it a bit better.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's interesting to see. I mean, I like to think about the future in general and kind of how AI will develop and what capabilities it will have. But it's interesting to hear from the horse's mouth. Obviously, you guys are in the front in developing these type of tools and so forth. So I appreciate that. Before we start rounding things off today at Pini, I'm also curious about something else. I mean, I've been in the industry for a long time, following a lot of the operators, and something I noticed that I guess it's pretty obvious is the fact that being an operator is almost like a commodity now, in a sense, where if I play on LeoVegas, if I play on Betson, the experience will be fairly similar. And you play the same games, you deposit with the same deposit methods, and it's commoditized in a sense. So I would imagine, I mean, since the core function of working with CRM marketing is to understand your customers and to differentiate yourself as a brand in some sense. Like, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how can you as an operator differentiate yourself using CRM marketing?
Yeah, I think it's actually great that you said that, because this is another difference between gaming and other industries and why CRM marketing is so well suited for gaming. So if you think about it, exactly as you said, and you gave two Swedish operators as an example, I wonder why. But the color of your hair, maybe.
I know. It gives me away every time.
But yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, gaming, are offering entertainment that's like with lots of tradition, right? Nobody's inventing a new blackjack, right? So you like blackjack because your father liked blackjack and he taught to play blackjack, or your best friend when you were 16. So we don't see a ton of new games in that space, right? So the games themselves are pretty similar, and then operators are using different content providers, and they just kind of like connect them to their platforms. So as a player, I can play games I can consume exactly the same content, probably with most operators, right? So you can say, and of course, different operators, they have different experience on their platforms, and they do have differences, but largely, it is. I think it's safe to say that they're selling a commodity. So that's generally when you're selling a commodity, you're trying to think what makes me different, right? So if I can engage players and I can show them that I know them and that I offer them value each time I engage with them and interact with them, I offer them much more relevance, then it could be a strategic weapon, right? It could be something that truly differentiates you from other folks in the same industry. And we feel that, our best clients actually did that. And something that we always like to monitor is that the gaming industry grows by 9%, at least probably after COVID, it's probably faster than that, but like before COVID, it was 9%. And the Optimove clients grow by 25%. So whether it's because, we always have, correlation versus causation, right? Are they better because they took Optimove, or were they better before that, and that's why they chose Optimove, right? But by just a stat, like a lot of fast growing brands, obviously like Entain and Fortuna, and the fastest growing brands in Italy, and Stickerman, and like different super fast growing brands, and the same goes in the US, like Hard Rock. They're basically relying on Optimove, and they understand this concept that through CRM marketing, through better engagement with their clients, they can actually boost customer lifetime value and maximize the value of every customer. And then they have more money to spend on acquisition because they get more out of every customer, and the loyalty just gets stronger and stronger. I remember a few years ago, it was like every player usually plays across 2 to 4 brands. 2 to 4 brands. So if you can increase your share of wallet, right, you obviously get a lot more. So I think that's to your point, that's like one of the main reasons why also gaming is such a good, because also the way brands perceive the idea of CRM marketing, it gets the attention of the C-suite. It's something super important. They put their best people on it. So then it's kind of like creates this really, really good place to optimize and flourish overall.
Fantastic. And last question, Pini. Marketing in, let's say, 5 to 10 years, how will the space look like? What will change? Big question.
In 5 years. Yeah. You talking about CRM marketing or generally about marketing?
I would say general marketing and how that relates to CRM. How the two converges.
Yeah, so I actually had a keynote session about it back in 2017 in one of our Optimove Connect summits, and essentially when I looked at it, it seems that like acquisition and retention marketing, or acquisition and CRM marketing, is kind of like merged. Slowly but surely, it's becoming. That's at least what I predicted. I predicted that data is going to become a commodity, right? And this is connected to privacy as well. But like, I actually thought at the time that the battle for privacy is somewhat lost. Mostly, people prefer the convenience of personalization rather than most people, right? Rather than guarding their privacy. And once data becomes a commodity, the entire planet can look like one big CRM database. So if that's the case, when you're running campaigns to acquire new customers, you will apply the same mindset that you have in CRM, not the mindset of acquisition today. Today, the mindset of acquisition is kind of like casting nets and seeing which types of fish swim in this certain area, and then kind of like optimizing the bid and optimizing the cost of acquisition and the ROAS and all of those things. Whereas in CRM, you're saying, here's a group of people, what's going to engage them, right? What do they like to see? What's most relevant for them? And once that line becomes more blurred, all marketing becomes CRM marketing. Now, I will say this is something I said 3.5 years ago, and ever since, right, we see the scrutiny that Facebook and Google are going through, and ever since, when they were in the U.S. Congress and all of those things that you saw, and I think since then they actually dumbed down their data capabilities. So, like in the past, you were able to acquire much more sophisticated segments within Facebook and Google, and now they dropped a lot of the filters, because I think they're trying to to get less heat from that place. So it's a good question, and it's connected to privacy as well. And obviously, Facebook and Google are the main players, and Amazon and Apple, but they're like kind of like the main players in that space. And it feels to me that if we talk about privacy, right, we can talk about the GDPR and if you're a gaming company, like what type of privacy you offer to your players with their data. But ultimately, you know, the biggest people to fear in terms of privacy are those big four companies. I mean, they have, you know, because they have cross-dimensional data. Yeah, like if I'm a player in a gaming company, you see only my gaming behavior. You're not seeing anything else. But if I'm Google, right, I can see, I can see where you go, right, through your mobile device. I can see where you're at. I can see what you do across the web, everything you browse, everything you look at. There's just so much data that they see, so they can really, you know, pinpoint a person and go deep in terms of who that person is. And that's pretty scary. The same goes with Facebook. Each one of them has their own different advantages, but ultimately, I think that's the way it works. But this is for marketing, I would say. And so still kind of like, I guess we'll see that we have 6 more years, so we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll do the podcast again and report what happened at the time. Yeah, but CRM marketing, I think, as I said before, I think it's going to be, you know, it's all going to a place where you know, a lot of the rule-based approach that exists today's approach mostly to CRM is a rule-based CRM journeys. So kind of like those journeys that you do, if this happened, that happened, and if the player deposited, and show him this and show him that. And the marketer needs to define all of the rules, and the marketer needs to think about everything, and this is just not scalable. This entire thing needs to become AI-driven. So the marketer will still define the treatments, but mapping out the journey and drawing the journey in between those different treatments, this will be done by AI. And that's essentially this is why I'm kind of like, this is the problem that I'm going after. This is my Moby Dick. And we call this AI mapped CRM journeys, but that's where we're at. And we're already partially there, and still kind of like some more stuff to do.
So marketers can breathe a sigh of relief that they are still going to be relevant for the foreseeable future, hand in 100%. Hand with the Iron Man AI costume.
Exactly.
I love that analogy, by the way.
Just going to become Iron Man. They'll be enhanced.
And who wouldn't want to be Iron Man? I mean, amazing.
Exactly.
Pini,
who doesn't
it's been on
Tony Stark, right?
Exactly. Pini, it's been an absolute pleasure today. You know, like you're saying, we definitely have to do this again. Like, thank you for giving the time today. I mean, I said before the podcast that I'm just a little Padawan here today, listening to Yoda. You know, and it's been a fascinating learning experience to go through this podcast together. So I wanted to just thank you for that opportunity. And you know, Optimove, I mean, I've been following you guys for quite some time. We haven't met before, Pini, but I'm really happy that we're in touch, and I'm really happy that to see kind of the growth that you've had over these 10 years, and hopefully this will be the one and only job that you will have for a long time. In other words, together with the growth process that comes with it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Pini, and I wish you a good day, and take care of yourself, okay?
Great. I love being in the podcast, and thank you, Pierre. And I hope the listeners got some value from the podcast.
Absolutely. All right. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other, and we'll see you soon.